Thank you for attending today's webinar entitled Navigating Cognitive and Executive Functioning Challenges. Our presenters are Brooke Smith, CNRS Administrator and Occupational Therapist, and Brittany Cooper, Program Director and Speech Language Pathologist, who both work for Opportunities Unlimited. Thank you for being here today, Brooke and Brittany. I'll go ahead and hand it over to the two of you.
Hi, thanks for having us today. My name is Brooke Smith. I am an occupational therapist. I have been for 12 years now in a variety of settings. I've worked in pediatrics, home health, acute care, and for the past 10 years have worked for Opportunities Unlimited, where we serve individuals who have sustained brain injuries in a more of a community setting. We have a few different programs here that we oversee. And that is kind of how I am involved with brain injury therapy.
I'm Brittany Cooper. I have been a speech therapist for over 17 years. I've worked at OU the whole time, so working with brain injuries, but I've also worked in many different settings too, so hospitals with pediatrics and outpatient and inpatient. I've done some skilled nursing facilities and schools as well.
Okay. So today we are going to talk about navigating cognitive and executive functioning challenges and how that can be seen in individuals with a brain injury and what caregivers and professionals can do throughout daily tasks or to make them more purposeful when navigating those challenges as an individual can sustain those deficits post-brain injury. Here are our learning objectives for today. We can let you guys read those on your own. So cognition is defined as all the mental processes that enable an individual to carry out a task. So it is going to obviously play a huge role in an individual's life in all aspects of their life. So looking at home, their home setting, it can impact their ability to manage the schedules of not only themselves, but people that they care for. It's going to impact everything from finances to making a grocery list to help preparing meals, making appointments for the family, medication adherence, and then of course just those daily ADL and IADL skills. Can you process and know how to shower by yourself? Can you do the laundry and things like that? So it's going to impact quite a bit at home. When looking at work or school, it's going to play a huge role in your attention and ability to maintain attention to the individuals talking, if you're needing to pay attention to what's happening and what's coming next as your day goes on. It's going to impact, can an individual stay productive? And it also plays a huge role in the fatigue that an individual sustains after a brain injury. It has a huge impact on relationships as well, and an individual's ability to understand and navigate social skills and those relationships, as well as to manage their emotions when dealing with other individuals.
So some components of like cognitive rehab, there's a couple different approaches. So the first one is a compensatory approach. So that is when if you want somebody to complete a task or complete a function, but they're not able to do it exactly like they did before because of damage or where they're at in their recovery process, we can use different strategies to implement to compensate for how they used to do something before. So the strategies will focus on like an external aid that will assist them to completing tasks. So some could be a planner if they're working on, and that could be like for a memory task or like recalling things or planning ahead. So doing some of that pre-planning stuff. They can use lists are going to be a compensatory strategy approach. You can use phones if they did that before. A lot of times you really want to start using things that they had in place before because they're going to be easier to use as a compensatory strategy. But there's apps and other things out there. So when they're looking at a compensatory approach, you're looking at compensating for something that hasn't actually come back exactly the way it was before.
And then the other approach to cognitive rehab is a restorative approach. This is when you feel that skill that the individual has lost does have the ability to come back. So you strengthen their abilities, their cognitive abilities through use and engagement, almost similar to like a physical therapist, how they would retrain physical muscles. The same is true with like those cognitive skills. It's the repetition and practice over and over that can help learn and train your brain to learn new pathways and new ways of doing things, to make it a functional skill and to help retrain that ability for the individual.
So some tips and tricks as we're kind of going through some of these, you want to make sure that you're always trying to do like a motor learning intervention. So you want to try as much as possible, if you're working on like a cognitive skill or a functional skill, that we're always trying to do it with motor, so that you're using all aspects of the brain and you're really helping them really relearn and build those pathways. So if somebody's working on like cooking, you can start talking about like things that are needed for the recipe. If you're working on like verbal commands, or you're working on like following directions as they're physically doing it, so that they're using some of that motor learning intervention at the exact same time. Or if they're walking, they can do some of those cognitive functions at the same time, so that we're really building and really trying to implement what we're trying to do, and use every aspect of the brain. You always want to be pretty flexible. Not everything's going to work every time, and they're not going to always have like a really good day. So you want to be flexible and make sure that you're willing to like change as the person needs it. We always want to be realistic. So set goals within a reality that they're experiencing right now. So not setting things like really too high or over promising things, but be realistic on what they can do, and then bring it back to like some of their own personal goals. Make sure you're always using as many familiar strategies as possible. So if they did use their phone for a lot of things, or if they wrote a lot of stuff down, like make sure that we're using those same strategies that they did before. That will only reinforce and assist with your rehab. A lot of people with a head injury do tend to have diffuse damage and deficits that are common. And a lot of those, then you'll see a lot of executive functioning impairments. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're working with people with brain injury. And then make sure that you always have that buy-in and that understanding for their deficits, and then how like the use of a strategy or the use of anything is actually going to impact them and why it would impact them.
There are 6 main cognitive domains according to the DSM-5. So when looking at complex attention, it's a domain that encompasses functions like divided attention, sustained attention, selective attention, and then also processing speed. Executive functions, which we obviously will go over a little more in this webinar, but this domain involves the abilities related to planning, decision-making, problem-solving, and shifting between tasks. So it plays a huge role in all those daily kind of functions that we do. Your language, the language domain encompasses both receptive and expressive language skills, including naming, word finding, fluency, and grammar. Learning and memory domain includes the ability to acquire new information and recall it over time. So that is going to look at both short and long-term memory. Perceptual motor function domain involves the integration of sensory information and motor skills. It includes coordination and visual spatial abilities. And then there's social cognition, which is our ability to understand and interpret social cues, recognizing emotions, and helping engage in social interactions, and our ability to process that and change over time. These are the executive function skills that we are going to go more in depth. So we will look at each individual executive functioning skill, some strategies for caregivers, and some strategies for professionals as we go into each domain here.
So the first one is your working memory. That involves both storing information for like a short period of time and then actively processing it and then using it like in real time as well. Working memory does play a critical role in things like when you are reasoning through something, your ability to comprehend new information, and then just processing and learning new tasks as well. So Some of the strategies that you could use, like you can chunk information. So like breaking things down in more manageable units or smaller information for them. So like breaking a phone number down into learning it, like by 3 digits, 3 and then 4. Like you can break things down into smaller information as needed. The use of external aids is one strategy to use with working memory. So you can use things like a sticky note if they need to. They can write stuff in a planner. You can have visual aids open for them if it's some quick stuff that they need to remember. There's digital reminders that you can do to like assist with like remembering like the next task throughout the day or what they're going to work on. A lot of things you want to have them do is when they're using a strategy, even if it's like auditory rehearsal for them, you want them to like repeat it and use that like information over and over. And then you want to make sure that what you're focusing on is that their strategy is functional for them. So the strategy is supporting their working memory so that they can do all of these other tasks. You can use checklists, tasks, notebooks, and then some step-by-step guides. That would be like single steps. So you're working on, they're clarifying their understanding for each step before they do something else. For treatment, you can try mnemonic devices to like retrain like multiple step activities if you want. We want to make sure that you allow them increased processing time and the use of those strategies during treatment. So whatever you're working on to support that working memory, you want them to use that in the treatment task, but you give them increased processing time when you're doing it. And there are some working memory apps like CogMed or Lumosity. You can work on like some short-term stuff to see if you can increase their ability to like store more information as needed.
Next, we're going to look at self-awareness. So self-awareness is an individual's ability to understand how they think, how they make decisions, and how they process information. It allows individuals to monitor their own behavior and adjust strategies as needed, and to better understand how their thoughts and behaviors are influencing their actions and their interactions with individuals as they go about their daily day. Self-awareness enhances an cognitive control, and it allows for better decision making, emotional regulation, and adaptive thinking, which are higher level skills that we want to work with an individual on. So some strategies for caregivers. First, you can look at goal setting. The first thing that you want to do when you're doing goals is setting goals for really small tasks and making them very simple and specific for the individual. So maybe it's today I want to be able to get dressed by 9 a.m. So you're setting a timeline for the individual and you're setting a small and manageable goal for them. We're not going to, start with large goals until they can kind of reach those smaller goals for smaller tasks and then move to those bigger goals. You can help increase their self-awareness as this is happening by saying, okay, did you reach your goal? What was helpful? What wasn't helpful? What did you do well? What could have changed? You can have them help rate their abilities after a task. So saying, okay, you did this, on a scale of 1 to 5, what, how efficient were you? How fatiguing was this? How well did you do? But also give them your feedback as well afterwards so they can see if your awareness is aligning with how they feel like they did. You can use think aloud strategies. So you can help model your thought process or helping them as they go along. So saying, I'm stuck. What can I change here? So you're just helping that thinking out loud is just going to help process a little easier for them. And just have them narrate their own steps as they go through things. It helps with those metacognition strategies. And then, of course, that task review. So when they are done completing a goal or a task for the day, reviewing it with them. It's great that you noticed you were distracted. That's the first step to improving. It's great that you were able to do this. I'm glad that you pivoted here. And then just make sure that you guys are kind of going over that so they can increase what they also thought was happening. For treatment ideas for therapists, you can do error awareness activities. So you can purposely give them different tasks or worksheets or whatever it may be that have intentional mistakes in them and see if they can spot the mistake and then explain why that is an error. You can follow that up with, have you ever made a similar mistake? How would you correct it? How could we correct this in the future so it would be easier going forward? Those rating scales, we talked about that with the strategies, but you can make it more formal and give it into a worksheet where they are numbering 1 to 5, use a face scale if you need to based on cognitive levels, and you can rank all kinds of things. What was your understanding? What was your ability to focus? How was your attention for this? Was this too hard for you? But make sure that you also are having them compare it with another rater. So whether it's the therapist, a family member, whoever that may be. You can do modeling. So often you can record an individual during a treatment session if they are okay with that. And you can have them watch that back and say, did you notice anything about yourself? Would you change anything? After watching it come back, looking at body language, communication style, and even just their approach to the overall task. You can then also use guided reflection questions. So encouraging regular check-ins with the individual and asking them, what was easy or hard about this? How did you feel? What was helpful? How did you get stuck? How were you able to come past that? So keep it short and consistent, but make sure that you're doing it often throughout the task with the individual, just to give them those check-in points.
So planning and organizing, that includes the person's ability to like prioritize activities and then also manage the time effectively. So knowing how long something is going to take them, predicting how long it is so that they can build it into a schedule, and then anticipate if there's any like a challenge or an obstacle that might come up, and then how would they work through that. These cognitive skills are really crucial for their ability to problem solve and then help with like decision making, and then execute like a complex task very successfully. So when you're working on things for planning and organizing, you can use planners and visual schedules. They can help with like understanding like how long they're going to do something, how long they like plan for it to take. There's digital calendars that they can use like on their phone, sticky notes, visual timers do help to understand for like routines or how long they think something's going to do. So if they're not sure how long something will take and they predicted something, you can set a timer or a time block and then see if they actually met it within that time frame. And that will help them stay on task, but also give them like information on how long things are really taking them. And so that they can start adjusting or trying to work through things a little bit faster, and they get like an understanding of how long something will take. Setting time limits will help for if they're having like a hard time, they get fatigued and they want to like sit down quite a bit. So they didn't realize how long something was taking or how much of a load it would be physically or cognitively. And then that will help them understand like, okay, well, if I do something like this, then I need to set time for like a break, or I need to take like some downtime, and then I can do another task. I did talk a little bit about time blocking already, but it is that just like completing stuff in a time frame and then having that follow through. Like, did it work out? Were you actually sticking to the time block? That is mainly that certain strategy. You can use digital tools and reminders. You can do like any task lists that can be on like an iPad and a phone. You can use those and have them like set up reminders. So like almost like an alarm, so that they know like what to do next. It is imperative, like it's really helpful for them to create like functional routines. So if they do something, the more somebody does something and repeats it over and over, it is going to like assist with some of that executive functioning too, as long as it's done kind of in the same way. And then we can see improvement on like that time frame and planning. So for treatment, you can look at some time management training. This would be like where you sit down, you pick the task, you can even like sequence a task, and then you say like, well, like how long do you think this will take you? And then you have them complete it and then be realistic. Like, okay, well, you thought that would take you 15 minutes and it took us 45 minutes. So how much like off your day are you going to be? You can use graphic organizers, mind mapping. Those are like visual tools like to help like organize ideas and problem solving out. You can use backward planning. So start with like the conclusion and then work your way back to like where they would start. So how we have to like get there to like map out all the steps in reverse. And that will help them like kind of see how long it would take to complete something. And then you can break stuff down like task chunking, or break it down into like specific, like small little things for them to do. So like, what do we do first? What should we do next? And then the next thing would be like that plan, do, review. So you want them to plan what the goal is, what do they need? And then when they do the task and they use like whatever strategy that they're planning to do, and then the review, like, did it work? How successful was it? What would you change next time? Was there nothing you would change? And then try to get them to like work through that cognitive process, and it will help with like their self-awareness and everything else too. And then we do want them to really understand task prioritization, or like what is the most important thing to get done. So sometimes we get caught on little things all the time. So we want them to be able to be like, okay, this is what I have to get done today, but this is like the most important. So if I don't get like the laundry done right now, that's okay for today, but I have to like make sure I get all of these things done. So working through that, like what needs to be done now, what can be done later, and really talking through those tasks, because it will help them with that thought process and that cognitive function.
Next, we're going to look at goal setting. So goal setting is deeply linked to cognitive functions such as attention, memory, executive functions, and it helps in organizing, monitoring, and adjusting your behaviors and how you approach something to reach a goal or a desired outcome. Setting clear goals requires a lot of mental planning and structuring of a task. So it engages a lot of those executive functions. So they have to work on organization, prioritizing what their task would be to reach it, and then also those time management skills. Cognitive resources need to be used to break down big goals into more manageable steps for an individual. So some strategies that caregivers can use, first would be a checklist. We like to use visually available ones that are easily seen and aware for the person. So whether it's something that you print out and make it very apparent to them, or if it's something where there's somebody who's maybe a little more cognitively functioning and that they can do a checklist on their phone or on a computer, excuse me, that might be a better option for them. Provide built-in checkpoints for them and allow them to self-reflect. You know, am I on track to reach my goal? Do I need to change pace? You know, am I going to make my deadline? So give them those check-in points to help build that self-awareness that they are actually on task and going to meet their goal. Setting deadlines helps people stay on track. So, you know, as much as nobody likes deadlines, we know that that's what kind of a lot of times gets people to complete their goal in time. So also setting deadlines for the individual. So, hey, we have an appointment at 11 o'clock today. I want you dressed, ready, and have eaten breakfast by 9:30. So setting those deadlines, those expectations to help an individual reach those goals. It also helps to break big goals into more manageable steps. So if the individual wants to be able to complete their whole laundry tasks by themselves, maybe we're going to start with just them loading the washing machine and being able to maximize their independence with that before setting the whole task. So making it into more manageable steps before we try to tackle the whole goal. When looking at treatment goals, of course, we want to make sure that we are doing SMART goals or whatever kind of goals that you learned. So, of course, SMART goals are specific, they're measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So making sure that you are addressing what you're addressing, you're setting time limits, and that it's an achievable goal for the individual. So like we talked earlier, you need the individual will be dressed by 9 a.m. this morning, right? It's achievable. It's specific. You're looking at them. Were they able to get dressed? You know, you can measure it by, did they actually do it? Do we have a shirt, pants, socks, and shoes on? Is it attainable to the person, realistic, and that time bound? So, right, it was 9 a.m. Set the goals at their cognitive level so it's manageable and achievable for that individual. So if they want to be a neuroscientist and that is not a realistic goal for them, then let's set them up for success and not set them up to be disappointed. Visual goal trackers are really helpful, whether it is something you create on your own, you know, making like a chart, a sticker system, if, you know, depending on the age of the individual, or there's a lot of like digital trackers that people can get for their phones and other things like that. It just helps to kind of see where your process is. Goals seem a little less overwhelming when you can see, hey, I'm at 50% of my goal. I'm halfway there. Reinforce their effort and not just the outcome. So saying, you know what, I saw that you're really sticking with this, even though it's getting hard for you. Or, hey, I noticed that you were able to change your approach here when you noticed something wasn't working. Good strategy. You're on your way to meet that outcome. Also, teaching the individual if then in planning helps build mental flexibility and helps them prepare for any outcomes that they might face. So if I didn't do something, then this is what happened. It also is going to help with any anxiety and fear that comes with the goal.
So self-initiation is the next one. So that is your internal like motivation for goals and awareness of needs and how you independently try to begin tasks or actions without that external prompting. So this is somebody needs to be very motivated and being able to initiate for themselves and start to like want to do some of these things. So some strategies at home you can use. You can start with an external prompt. So you can use like a visual schedule or a timer or a verbal cue, but we do want to try to like fade out the support and see if they can gradually just start like initiating some of that on their own and they start to independently start doing some of these things. So you can fade out those prompts just to gain independence. So if you start with like a checklist, like a visual checklist, you can reduce it to just like a 1-word cue and then eventually like not using it at all if possible. Routines and structures will help establish very good habits at home. So the more you can do something consistently, especially if it is a routine type thing. So if you're looking at like ADLs, like, so if it's like getting your teeth brushed in the morning, like if you can start a routine and kind of finish the routine and always have it, it does help create habits, and those are easier to fade out that support and like initiate some of that tasks on their own without that external aid. You can reduce their task load as needed. So breaking tasks into smaller, clearer steps. So if their whole thing was like their morning routine, you could break it down to just toothbrushing, and then you could do like, or just self-dressing. Like you can break things down so you reduce that task load so that they can be very successful and maybe initiate part of it. And then you can build up to the whole routine itself. You could use visual or a physical anchor. So that would be like a sticky note or a task card. You can use some whiteboards in like specific locations for them. And then you want to place things in specific locations too. So like putting their shoes by their door, or if they need to remember like their keys or their wallet, like always having like a basket that they put it in, and they can have it like when they leave the room or by the door or wherever they would always have that kind of stuff. So then you can like kind of set it up so those are those visual or those physical anchors for them. So it kind of helps them build a better self-initiate, and then they can see that, and then they can begin the task without any sort of prompting for that. You can use some technology too at home, Alexa, Google prompts to go off. So they're still getting a reminder, but it's not actually coming from a person, and see if that can help initiate some of that self-initiation for them. If you're doing some treatment, if then planning is very good. So if it's like, if you talk to them, so like, okay, it's like noon, what should we plan on doing? Like at noon, you're going to do what? So if it's like once it's 12 o'clock, then what are we going to plan on doing? Oh, I need to start like making my lunch, or I need to like take a break for lunch, that kind of stuff. You want to do that if then, and start getting them looking at that. So they know like once it becomes this, or if my reminder goes off, what does that mean I need to do? So I have like an alarm set for 10 a.m. What is that reminder set for? And it's okay, it's set for my laundry, like so that they can start getting into that. You can do motivational mapping. That's tasks for like personal interests. So things that they are very, very motivated by. So why does it matter? And then what are some like natural incentives that you would use to make sure that you get to that? Because people are going to be more motivated to do things that they are actually, they want to initiate for. And then that internal self-talk, and it will assist with internal prompting. So what you want to do is when you're teaching and doing self-talk, that's what you want their thought process to start to look like for themselves, that internal prompting for them. So you want to do self-talk for them, and hopefully that will go into those internal prompts.
Next is self-monitoring and self-evaluating. So it's looking at an individual's ability to observe and be aware of their own performance, but also to do it in real time and to be able to adjust their performance during the task to make it more successful for them. So can they change the behavior on the spot? Are they noticing errors as they're happening? Are they able to stay and pay attention to what's happening? Are they able to identify what their strengths and weaknesses are before, during, and after a task? So some strategies that caregivers can do for this is, again, using checklists or those pause and check times. So creating simple checklists, which is tailored to the task, is going to be important. But then insert little checkpoints for them. Hey, how are you doing? Are you following the directions? Are you staying focused? Are you successful up to this point? Do we need to pivot at any point here? Setting visual timers or task monitors can be helpful as well. So maybe setting a timer for them to check in every 5 to 10 minutes and to ask themselves those questions, those pause and check times. How am I doing? Am I on task? Do I need to change what I'm doing? What's working? What's not working? There is an app called Focus Keeper that can help and be really helpful with things like that. You can also do those self-rating scales that we talked about earlier, rating themselves on 1 to 5, or whether it's a smiley face strategy or whatever you need to do. How focused was I? Was I able to reach my goal? Did I do it in a timely manner? Any of those things that you're really working on the individual, you can have them rate. For treatment ideas for therapists, first using think aloud strategies with them. Teach the person to verbalize their thought process as they work. Okay, I'm starting now. Next, I need to do this. Am I staying focused? Am I staying on topic? Any of that is going to help build that internal awareness and self-reflection skills to help them monitor their progress throughout that task. Looking at those error detection things like we talked about. So finding things that have intentional errors. Are they able to identify them, fix them, monitor themselves during that whole process? It's going to help build that awareness of those patterns and just strengthen that internal monitoring. Peer or partner feedback. So have them do something next to someone else in a session. Maybe they're working on similar things. They can also use somebody to get feedback from them. Hey, what step are you on? Am I doing it at the same? If we are cooking a meal together and we're both practicing a recipe, am I on the same step they are? Am I doing it too slow? Am I doing it too fast? Am I having errors? It's just going to help them reflect on how they're doing compared to another individual. Post-task reflections. So of course, going over them afterwards. What went well? What was hard? What do you need to do different? And just a reminder, you can do this in different areas. So whether it's the feedback needs to be written, or whether it's something that you're asking them questions, whether it's just using gestures with them. Based on the cognitive level of the individual, you can change how you're asking those questions to them. Next is goal setting. So setting those small goals so they can help evaluate how they're doing quicker with the task. So instead of waiting until the whole task is completed, setting those small goals to help them evaluate how they're doing as they're going on. And those review loops helps build accountability and pattern recognition through that. We talked about video monitoring earlier, so tape them doing it, allow them to watch that back so they can notice any areas of weakness, help evaluating any strength, and then so they can know how they can adjust how they would do it again the next time around. Modeling and guided practice, again, having an adult or peer model how they do it, and then shifting their responsibility from the other individual back to them. So I can watch a therapist do this, but how then can I make this successful for myself?
So self-inhibit, that's the person's automatic, impulsive, or inappropriate responses in order to act in a goal-directed or more of a socially appropriate way. So for strategies, you could use those stop and think cue. So what you want them to do is have that internal pause before using a verbal or a visual cue. Like you want them to stop, think about what they're going to say before they do it. So that stop, think, and then we want to act for it. Sometimes you need to use like a sign for them, or you can have like hand signal, but anything like if it is like a verbal cue, just to kind of get them to stop and think where they're going with this, so that they can learn to kind of put that pause into place, so that we're not having any inappropriate responses or getting upset when it's not necessary. You can teach them some mindfulness and breathing techniques too. So if they're really struggling with more of like everything kind of works themselves up and they're not able to process information when they're in like a heightened state, you can work on some breathing techniques and stuff. So simple breathing exercise to get them to come down, to increase like that moment to moment awareness and reduce their impulsivity at that point. So like asking them to take some deep breaths before you answer something. You can have them listen to some music, but we want to do something that's successful, so then they can come back and problem solve or talk through and do some things when they're in a better state of mind. Always give some positive reinforcement if you can. So catch them and then reward the inhibited behavior. So if you did see them do something like, oh, I saw you stop you stopped yourself from interrupting, like you waited for the appropriate time to ask a question. Like they'll give that feedback to them so that they know that they did it and you recognize that they were doing it too, and that they can get that positive reinforcement on doing the positive thing that they are doing. Environmental structuring, you can reduce as many triggers as you could for them. I mean, we're not going to be able to reduce everything, just to make them more successful. So you could put things out of sight, like if they do have like more of an impulse to respond to different things, or if something is a trigger for them, you can try to put it out of sight. But provide clear expectations for when you are using that for a structured event, because it's not always going to be available. We can't structure every environment. For treatment, you can do some role playing or use of some social scripts to help them with this. So what you're going to be looking for is more of like practicing situations where they are being very impulsive. So if it is like interrupting somebody, or if they're grabbing people to get like somebody's attention, so you want to give them like, what are their alternative behaviors? So yes, I see what your plan was, but it is not like an appropriate way. What should they do instead? And then you can like practice or model your way through that. Social scripts would be like talking it out. So like if in their mindset, so like it would be like, if I'm upset, I'm going to take 3 breaths. So you're going to use a social script to walk them through different things. Delayed or distracted strategies or delayed gratification. That's when you're going to do an action by they will get something after a point of time. So what you're trying to build in is that wait time, that not impulsive like time. You're helping them with that. So like if they really are obsessed with having a drink of pop or something and somebody else has one and they're always wanting to grab something, you would have that available out in front of them and be like, okay, in 30 seconds, you can have a drink of pop, but you can't touch the pop before them. You want to like make sure that they're starting to build in, like they don't have to instantly use that impulse. But they could use things also like a fidget or something else to be successful during that wait time before they get whatever they're hoping for. You can practice go, no-go games, such as like a red light, green light. That's going to help stop that instant impulse to like respond right away. Simon Says there's also some other like cognitive training tasks, but what you're looking for is like, it's not consistent. So there's not a consistent pattern to something that they would respond, or then they don't have to respond to something like slapjack, that kind of stuff. Like you want something where they have to like stop that impulse right away. And then visual tools are their self-monitoring and treatment. So like you want to have them have a checklist, or if they're going to play a game, like, did I wait my turn afterwards? Was I being respectful? Did I stop before I act? So after you've worked on something, give them that feedback afterwards.
Next is change set. So that is your cognitive ability to switch from one way of thinking to another during a task happening. So it's also just another term is your cognitive flexibility. So an example would be if we're laughing and joking in a room and your boss walks in and the meeting is started, can you switch from that joking kind of behavior and then get to a more serious outlook or demeanor there? So that is going to impact a lot of the things that you do and that quick thinking ability. So some strategies for caregivers. Sometimes providing visual cues for transition can really help. So whether it is something saying, here's a visual timer and then we're switching to a different task, or, maybe it's a color coded thing. A lot of times teachers for children in school will have like simple clapping sequences that they'll do that will help like initiate and cue that a transition is about to occur. You can also look at different emotional regulation strategies, just helping to manage any frustration and anxiety that can come with any of those changes. So whether it's preparing the individual in advance that this is going to happen, provide them time to maybe have some calm down time, some deep breathing time, and then just validating that discomfort that comes with those changes and those quick change in an expectation or the rule of something. So it's hard when plans change, but we have to move along. Let's figure this out together. Reflecting after the shift is great too. So it's just going to help build that awareness too. So what helped you shift your thinking? What could we do better next time? How did you notice it was time to change the behavior or how you were reacting to something? Looking at different treatment ideas. Using flexible thinking language can help. So you want to reinforce a growth mindset and use phrases like, hey, let's try this a different way, or, this didn't quite work how we wanted. What if we try this way? Or what other ideas do you have that we could try here? You also want to just really point out when they have been really flexible. Hey, you changed how you did that. That was great. And look how it worked out for us. Practice those rule changing games. So do red light, green light, but make it with different signals, or do play an Uno game, but change the color rules or make it say something else. Doing the opposite Simon Says. So if Simon says sit, you're actually going to jump. Okay. So it's just going to help them change the rules and change those expectations. Teaching them self-talk whenever they are going to have to shift. Okay, the rules change. What can I do now? It's time to shift gears. I was doing it one way. I need to try another way, and all of that's okay. Exposure to low stakes change. Intentionally change small things. So let's change the seating arrangement. Let's change, if they walk into treatment and they always start with OT first, maybe let's change and we're going to start with PT and then OT and see how they handle that. And then just really talk them through that. Like usually we do this first, but it's okay to actually change this. And it's going to help just build that tolerance for change and then their flexibility with allowing things to happen. You can also use those what if and scenario questions like we've talked before. So building flexible thinking by asking, okay, well, what happens if the plan doesn't work? Then how do we go from there? What do you do if the rules change and how do you proceed from there?
So strategic behavior, that's going to be goal-directed behavior that involves choosing and applying cognitive strategies based on a task or an outcome. So an example of a strategic behavior would be like if a student like in class decides to reread a question to make sure that they are understanding it before they answer it. Or if somebody's working on time management, they have to get through like all the test questions and then, one question will take a lot longer, but they want to make sure they finish it. They skip that one question that's going to take longer, try to finish everything else to then come back to it so that they do stay like within their time frame. You can also think of it like if somebody's getting like a job, you tailor your resume for the job that you're applying for. So it's a strategic behavior is what we're looking at. So you're using those cognitive resources that you have deliberately, and that you're problem solving, it will help with your problem solving, your academic success, and just independent functioning, that you understand what it is. So it's just a difference between like just responding automatically versus like an active and thoughtful response. Some strategies like at home, you can use like a reflection tools. Those are just going to be like reflecting on the task. So like, was that strategy useful? What did you use? How did it work? What could you use next time? And these are going to be really high for like help with their metacognition, but overall their whole ability to understand how they are processing and the outcome that is it working for a desired outcome. And then you want to practice across all the contexts. So if they're using a strategy, you don't want to just use it once, you want them to use it all the time. So it can help like reinforce it at home, school, in the community, that kind of stuff. Treatment ideas, you want to teach them like an explicit strategy to use. So you want them to know, like teach them what you want. And then like, if you don't know a word, like what do? You try sounding it out, or you look at a picture and come back. So you want them to teach the strategy and then have them use it. Modeling like strategic thinking, that's like just thinking out loud. So you're going to like, I'm going to read the question first and then I will look for the answer. So you're trying to like help them process out loud that strategic, like what are they going to use for that strategy? And then you can provide them with like different menus or banks if you want. So like kind of creating a toolbox. So all the different strategies that they could possibly use and different ones, and when are they successful? And then talking about that, like when was it successful for you to make a list? And why isn't it successful in this situation to do that same outcome that you thought, that strategy that was very helpful? You can scaffold their goal-directed behavior. So you're going to help set specific goals. Like, so what's your plan for this problem? So they bring you a problem, like, but what's your plan for the problem? So you're going to look at like the plan, the do, and then the check it and then reflect it. So how is it working? How was it successful? And you're going to kind of walk them through that. Reinforce strategy use, not just the outcome. So you want to really focus on like, if they were using a strategy, I liked it. It was really good that you used that checklist during this. That was very successful for you, versus saying like, oh, that was really good that you got up and got on time to school today, or you were able to complete that whole project. Like, what do you want them to use? And not just like, you want to reinforce that versus like always the outcome for it. So they know that they were using it successfully. And then you want to gradually always to increase their independence with therapy. So you can start with like a guided practice and move to more like their independence with planning and self-reflection always. So you can start with like sentence starters or a graphic organizer, but then you also want to just like phase out all the support if needed.
And just to wrap everything up, cognitive rehab is an essential component to brain injury rehab. So we know that physical deficits are easier for caregivers to overcome and to handle. It's often the cognitive deficits that really keep an individual more of a struggle to take care of or to handle for caregivers, and also for therapists as well. So addressing the cognitive component of brain injury rehab is essential for helping to rehab individuals after a brain injury. Both approaches should be used, compensatory and restorative, just to help increase recovery and what is appropriate and going to be functioning for the individual. And then working on all tasks, you need to make things go from simple to more complex, and that's going to be true in their daily life as well. And it also is true of cues and fading support. So maybe you have to provide a lot of visual cues or verbal cues throughout somebody's day, but you eventually want to help fade that away and make them more independent with tasks. Does anyone have any questions for us?
While we give folks a minute to see if they have any comments or questions, I just want to thank you both so much. So informative and such an incredibly important topic for our Iowans navigating life after brain injury. Really, really appreciate you both taking the time to share your time and talent with all of us. We'll pause again. I didn't see any comments or questions come in. I'll give another moment for folks to see if they have any. I did share the post-webinar knowledge check in the chat box for attendees that are hoping for CEU, so that's there. And one question, it sounds like, can you share again the apps that you mentioned?
Luminosity was one.
And those are going to be like some short time. CogMed has some too that you can, and some of them are subscription, some of them have some free things. And they are things where it's just kind of like a short, like practice that you can do for some executive functioning areas. You can also use like apps on like your phone, but like we were talking about, a lot of it is like reminders. So there are reminder programs, like, and it kind of depends on what somebody wants to use it for. There's not like a perfect like one that I think for a lot of those, whatever works, but you can, a lot of like the phones now have those built in, or you can use Alexa or Google Home too to help set reminders or visual cues or verbal cues, to really make people successful.
And even, yeah, just as simple things like the calendar app on your phone or the notes pad. So you can get creative with the individual.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have some gratitude coming in. Great information. Good job. Thank you for the information. Ladies, again, thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy days to come share your knowledge and obvious passion with all of us. This, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, this was recorded. So we will go ahead and get this either today or tomorrow. We'll get it uploaded to our YouTube page. And yeah, thank you all for being here. Ladies, thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
You too. Thank you.